Hi, welcome back guys, and thanks for stopping by. Recently I posted a video on the best cinematic settings for your Mavic Air, in which there was a section that talked briefly about ND filters and the importance of ND filters. That video sparked quite a few questions about ND filters. So what I did is take all of that information and put that into the top 10 questions that people ask about ND filters and what you need to know. So we're going to dive into that. Let's get started. First, to recap, the purpose of an ND filter is to help you achieve the 180-degree shutter rule, which is the most widely accepted principle in achieving video quality and the proper amount of motion blur. So basically, your goal is to have your shutter speed 2 times that of your frame rate. So if my frame rate is 30 frames per second, I need to have my shutter speed at 1/60, or 1/60th of a second. Now, the only way to achieve that slow of a shutter speed is to have an ND filter. Otherwise, you'll be way overexposed, and you would need to have your shutter speed at something like 1/500 because the brightness from the sunlight would be too much for the camera to handle. So question number one is, what if there is no motion in your video? That's actually a very good question, and to be honest, if you have your Mavic up in the air and you're filming a landscape, you're not moving, it's kind of like a portrait setting, actually motion blur is not going to come into play here, and I think you would be just fine without having your ND filters, and you could actually set your shutter value up at whatever it needs to be properly exposed, like at something 1/200, 500, depends on the situation. But so if nothing's moving in the shot, motion blur's kind of irrelevant. So that's actually a very good question. Another question that I got was, when purchasing ND filters, should I get a 3-pack or a 6-pack? Honestly, I'm the sort that doesn't like to have too many choices. These are the Polar Pros that I bought for the Mavic Pro, and then these are the same for the Mavic Air, right? And these are the DJI version that I bought for the Mavic Pro before I bought the Polar Pro version. I wouldn't bother with getting 6 different ones. That's personal preference. Now, some of you guys are really into the videography, and so 6 would be recommended for your specific needs, just to cover all your bases. So really the choice is yours, but in my opinion, I would just stick to 3 for the hobbyist. Okay, so the next question is, should I get the DJI brand ND filters, or should I go with another third-party brand? So this is going to be controversy. I'm sure lots of folks have different opinions on this. So here's my story. I bought these filters for the Mavic Pro, and hopefully you can see right here. I'll try to move that around. This is the one I bought from DJI, and it seemed like it was doing pretty well for a month or two, and then I noticed this crack in this one. This is the ND16 filter. It just cracked. I mean, I don't know how you could really use an ND filter excessively. They just sit on the end of the camera. There's no wear and tear essentially on these things. So, but after like 2 months, the lens cracked, and so I didn't really want to bother with replacing it with the same thing and having the same result. So I went to Polar Pro. I did some research, and everybody had good things to say about Polar Pro. So I bought the Polar Pro for the Mavic Pro. Was totally happy with it. Used this for the past year. When the Mavic Air came out, I did the same thing. I just went straight to the ones from Polar Pro. Totally happy with these. These came out like 2 weeks after the Mavic Air was actually released. So I mean, I think these guys have a pretty good relationship with DJI. So I'm sure there's a lot of behind the scenes integration with these lenses and the testing that they do on the Mavic Air, because I mean, these were available almost immediately, and I think now the DJI filters are still not available yet, or they might just be coming available. So in my opinion is DJI makes great quadcopters, they make great gimbals, and Polar Pro makes fantastic ND filters. So okay, so the next question is, will my Mavic Pro ND filters fit on my Mavic Air? The answer to that is absolutely not. Two totally different form factors. This is the Mavic Air, it screws on. This is the Mavic Pro, it slides on. Okay, the next question is, does the weight of the ND filter affect the gimbal on either the Mavic Pro or the Mavic Air? In my experience, both answers to that are no. Especially with the Mavic Air, you actually remove the lens on the Mavic Air and replace the ND filter in place of the existing lens. The Mavic Pro, the one that slides on, this goes on over the camera lens. Again, this thing is so light, it's just made of very lightweight aluminum, very thin aluminum on the sides, and it just slides on there. I mean, there's really no weight to this at all. You know, I've had this over a year now, and I've had no issues with using this on the gimbal on the Mavic Pro, so works perfectly fine. Okay, so the next question is, how do you install both the ND filters on the Mavic Pro and the Mavic Air? It's a piece of cake. Let's do it. Okay, so first up we have the Mavic Pro, and what I like to do is take the gimbal cover off, and then I put the gimbal clamp down here. I keep that on because it provides a little bit of a backstop. So this one, you just actually slide it on, and then just make sure that it's kind of lined up around all the edges. Okay, so now we have the Mavic Air. Basically, you want to remove the gimbal cover and try to hold the camera in your hands. I try to hold with my left hand and try to rotate it just to give me more room. So this is the stock lens. You remove that. All right, so you take this and just simply thread this over the threads from the previous lens. And you just gotta make it snug. Okay, so the next question is, how do you know which ND filter to use in what type of situation? Polar Pro has developed an app for your smartphone. On the iOS version for iPhones, it's a great app. I'll put a link in the description to a video that Billy Kyle put up. It's fantastic for iPhones. Unfortunately, I have an Android, and the Android version of that app is pretty much terrible. So what I do is I have an ND4, an ND8, and an ND16. The ND4 is basically something that I use when there's very little need for the ND filter. You know, in the morning time and there's like a decent amount of light, but it's not bright yet. It's just like dawn, or it's just getting ready to be dusk. That's when I use the ND4. But if there's like a pretty significant amount of clouds in the sky, partly cloudy, partly sunny, but not bright, wide open sunlight, that's when I use the ND8. And then for me, I use the ND16 if it's just bright and sunny, middle of the summer, high noon, very bright sunlight. This is going to vary from, you know, what geography that you're in. Like I said, if you're in the desert or desert type situation, or at a beach with, you know, a lot of sun coming down, you know, no clouds in the sky, a lot of sunlight radiating off the sand. Those are situations where you might need something more than an ND16, so you might need to look at an ND32 or an ND64 even. So for my purposes, ND4, ND8, and ND16 fit perfectly. Really, it's a matter of practice and see what works for you. Okay, and next question is, does this affect the flight time of your Mavic in any way? I would say emphatically no, it doesn't do anything to the flight time. Okay, another question I got a couple times was, do I need to remove the ND filter before I put the gimbal cover back on? Absolutely not. What I do is I just make sure that it's lined up and facing forward. Gimbal cover just goes right over the top like that, and then locks into place. Piece of cake. Same situation. This gimbal cover is a lot more globe-like, so it's a piece of cake. I've got the filter on there. Perfectly fine. The last question I got was, should I get the Cinema series or should I get the Standard series? So this is just a budget decision. The way that I arrived at my decision was I had a negative experience with the DJI ND filters on the Mavic Pro, and those were what I would consider just standard ND filters. So I wanted to get something better quality. So then I went to Polar Pro, saw that they had nice ND filters, and I got the best that they had. So the difference between the Cinema series and the Standard series is just basically a higher quality glass. So you're just going to get less glare with a higher quality of glass, and that's it. Okay guys, so that is everything that you need to know specific to ND filters for the DJI Mavic, whether it be the Mavic Pro or the Mavic Air. Those are the top 10 questions that I got based off of my previous video on the best cinematic settings. So I hope that answers your questions. If not, please leave a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video.